Since engines were invented, car owners have been tinkering, altering and tuning their vehicles to make them that little bit more efficient and a little bit more powerful. Four-wheel drive owners in the 21st century are no different, and many of us seek for new products and methods to tune our vehicles to squeeze that little bit more power out of the engines. Whether it be a 4-cylinder Prado, 5-cylinder Ranger, 6-cylinder Amarok or 8-cylinder Landcruiser. In today's episode, we're going to look at some of the popular power upgrade options on the market today, talk about the pros and cons of each, some of the considerations you may want to take into account if you're looking at one of these for your own vehicle, what I've done to my 200 series Landcruiser and how it's been performing so far. So let's get straight into it. Historically, tuning your vehicle's engine would mean physically taking apart the engine and making physical changes within inside the carburetor. Whether these changes meant altering the fuel mixture ratios, how much mixture would enter the combustion chamber, or the timings, it would all have an effect on the power output. Aside from this, you could also make physical changes to componentry by adding camshaft, lifters or jets, and again, this would have an effect on the peak performance at one particular point on the power curve. This was the thing, with your older vehicles, you're generally tuning the vehicle to perform at its peak performance or maximum efficiency at one point on that performance curve. So times have changed since then, and vehicle manufacturers now use electronics in the form of ECUs to manage all the timing and mixtures within our engine. And this has completely changed the way in which we typically tune our vehicles. Move forward to today, to this 2014 Toyota Landcruiser 200 series, and we have hundreds of sensors that manage and control all aspects of the vehicle. This also allows us to tune and alter so many more parameters within inside the engine and the driveline of the vehicle, giving us peak performance and maximum efficiency at not just one point on the power curve, but throughout the entire power curve itself. So as four-wheel drive owners, what is available to us on the market today to push out that extra performance? So let's start with plug-in control modules, sometimes referred to as chips. Now, chips are a small electronic circuit board that plug into the vehicle to modify signals from the ECU to enhance the vehicle's performance. They work by altering a whole range of parameters from the factory ECU, including injector timing, duration, common rail pressure, and air-fuel ratios. All of these settings can help improve the performance of the vehicle electronically and push more power out of the engine. Some of the tunes, although matte chips, also have the ability to taper off the tunes when temperatures are getting too high, but some don't. So there are pros and cons to these types of modules, and let's go over them now. The first advantage of a chip is that they are cost effective. Chips are generally a cheap way to increase or enhance the performance of your engine. This is because manufacturers can produce these in bulk for a specific make and model of vehicle. The second advantage is that they are easy to install. They are often designed to be a plug-and-play setting, meaning that you can plug these chips directly into your vehicle's wiring either before or after the ECU, and this will work to trick or deceive the ECU in sending signals out to the physical components in those altered states. This is going to provide more power within those parameters to provide a more powerful stroke. The third reason, in addition to being cheap to buy, they are often cheap and easy to install. The fact that they plug directly into your vehicle means that most people can fit them whether you're mechanically minded or not. Plugging these chips directly into your vehicle won't require any mechanical or specialized experience and doesn't necessarily require any live tuning on road or on a dyno. So plug and play and you're off on the road. So a fourth advantage with some of the chips is that the fact that they come with pre-programmed maps. And this means that the driver can switch the way in which the chip alters the signals of the ECU and the parameters within that tune profile to best suit the scenario that they're driving in. Whether or not you want a maximum torque and horsepower for a straight line pull, or perhaps you want a profile that best suits towing heavy loads, or maybe even one for slow four-wheel driving, low range scenarios, this can be possible with a chip and a control module mounted on the dash. Now the fifth advantage is going to be the fact that these modules can be removed. Whether or not you want to remove it to diagnose a fault with the vehicle, or perhaps you want to transfer it to a different vehicle or sell the vehicle without the chip, this is all possible with something like a chip control module. So chips sound good, right? They provide that extra tuning we're looking for. They provide better efficiency, improved power, and all at a relatively simple and easy setup cost. But what are some of the negatives involved with these chips? Now the first disadvantage, or perhaps more of a consideration that you have to take into account if you are looking at chips, is to trust the individual or the company that you're buying that product from. Technically, any person with an intermediate IT knowledge, a basic mechanical understanding and a computer can put together a tune, package it up and sell it as a product. But you need to make sure that you're considering all aspects of the vehicle, you trust that manufacturer so that your vehicle is going to be safe and reliable going on into the future. Now, the second disadvantage is the limited effect they have on vehicles. And what I mean by this is just the fact that they are restricted somewhat in terms of what parameters they can set, but also how they are designed. The fact that they are mass produced by these companies to provide the power enhancements to this very specific make or model of vehicle is great. However, they don't take into account the sort of situation, terrain and environment that you're driving your vehicle in. They don't know what tires you're running, what aerodynamic accessories that you've added to your vehicle and how heavy your vehicle is. It's a very standard tune, and without custom live tuning, you're not going to get the most efficient peak performance from that chip. Now, this is not to say that the chips can't be live tuned on a dyno, however, they are somewhat limited in the intervention of the vehicle's ECU. The third disadvantage is also going to be cost, and more so you get what you pay for. Given the fact that you're buying a generic chip that is generally cheaper than other power and performance upgrades, you are potentially not going to be getting that maximum efficiency or peak performance that you might be looking for. Whether or not the chip doesn't see or isn't unable to access some of the parameters of the vehicle, you're not going to get the same efficiency and peak performance that you would out of a custom live tune. The fourth disadvantage is going to be warranty. It's going to be a big consideration for those with newer vehicles. Most, if not all, manufacturers are not going to honour the warranty of your engine, transmission or driveline if you have aftermarket performance enhancing modifications fitted. There are some manufacturers who will also deny any warranty claims on any part of your vehicle if those are fitted. Now, although it's an advantage to be able to remove the chip from the vehicle, some of these chips do leave some trace evidence behind on the ECU, and vehicle manufacturers are able to tell whether or not chips have been previously fitted to a vehicle, and again, this is going to affect future warranty claims. Now, I know some people will say, well, the manufacturer will have to prove that this is what caused the issue. However, keep in mind with some of these massive companies and their market dominance and their huge budgets, contesting these in court is just not going to be a feasible option for those average consumers. So chips are going to be a reasonable option for those looking for a genuine power upgrade in their vehicle with a simple, cost-effective and easy to install package. My biggest advice to those looking for chips is do your research. Speak with others who have had similar products installed, read the fine print of the documents and ask your tuner questions. This is all going to help you build some confidence in your tuner in case something goes wrong later down the track. Another very popular way to upgrade the performance of your four-wheel drive is to remap the ECU. This works by reprogramming the vehicle's factory ECU directly. Just like as with a chip, you're altering the factory parameters, you're doing the same thing with a remap. However, there is no additional hardware required and you're directly loading a tune and those altered parameters onto the factory ECU. But there are some different pros and cons you need to take into account, and let's go through them now. The first and probably the biggest advantage of an ECU remap is the customizability. Being able to tune directly to the ECU gives us access to all the parameters of the vehicle and able to fine-tune that remap to best suit our circumstances. Now, every vehicle, even the same make and model, is going to react a little bit differently to tuning. This is just due to factors like previous modifications fitted, the age of the vehicle, how the vehicle's been used previously, potentially even previous engine repairs. However, the ability to tune directly onto the ECU allows us to factor all of these into consideration when conducting that tune. The second advantage is going to be high efficiency. The fact that we're targeting and focusing on a very particular and specific vehicle means that we can alter those parameters, see how the vehicle reacts to that, and then fine-tune the remap to best provide us the best efficiency and power output, all while retaining the best possible reliability. So the third advantage to an ECU remap is the lack of additional hardware required. Like with a chip, you're required to put in a physical item into your vehicle, whether before or after the ECU, to modify those signals sent to the physical components. This requires additional code in the script writing of the electronic components, and it's just another thing that could potentially go wrong. With an ECU remap, it is directly placed onto the vehicle's computer. There's no need to trick or deceive the ECU, as the ECU is modified to send out those signals for peak performance. So just like with everything, there are going to be some disadvantages and some considerations you need to look at before looking at a remap. Now, the first disadvantage, or something you need to consider, is going to be the cost. Generally, they're going to cost a little bit more. And I say generally because there are going to be times where this is not going to be the case. However, you're not necessarily paying for that physical product, but you're paying for someone to design the tune and then live tune your vehicle to maximize that efficiency for your engine. Now, it is possible to install a pre-programmed tune directly onto the ECU and leave it at that. However, it is strongly recommended that you at least test the tune on a dyno or on the road to make sure it's safe and operable, but also to fine tune to get that maximum efficiency. Again, you're paying for that labor cost, which is going to increase the cost, but it's going to give you the best possible result. Now, the second disadvantage or factor to consider is the same as the chip, and that is going to be to trust the person who is tuning your vehicle. Just the same as with a chip, if you get a poor tune installed on the ECU, not only is it a little bit harder to remove than a chip, but it also could have disastrous consequences if it's not done correctly. Now, the third consideration is that you are not installing a physical product, which means that if you want to remove it from the vehicle, you can't then go and use it on another vehicle or sell that remap. You can delete the remap off the ECU and refresh it with the factory settings to have the vehicle behave as it did before. But if you want to reuse a map or retune your vehicle, you're going to have to start the whole process again and pay for the whole process as if it was the first time. Now, the fourth disadvantage is again going to be warranty, just the same as it was with the chips. Most manufacturers aren't going to support work done outside of those factory parameters, and it's just something you have to keep in mind and come to terms with if you are looking for performance upgrades. So as we can see there, an ECU remap works very similar to the way in which a chip operates, and the fact that we're altering those factory electronic parameters to try and increase the performance of the vehicle. However, there are some differences there, including the fact that we're not purchasing a physical product, but we are potentially getting a high efficiency and better performance benefit from something like a remap. Now, of course, a third and very popular way of improving the performance of your vehicle's engine is by physical hardware upgrades. Things like cold air intakes, high flow airboxes, bigger or modified turbos, larger injectors, camshafts, or larger exhausts can all have a big effect on the way the vehicle performs. However, ironically, these vehicle modifications generally need a vehicle tune or some sort of modification to the vehicle's electronics to keep that engine running smoothly and again to maximize the efficiency and performance of those aftermarket accessories. Keeping in mind that these sort of hardware upgrades also cost a lot of money and are generally on the more expensive side of performance upgrades. Now, vehicle tuning is a very individual thing. There are many people out there who are very satisfied and content with the power output of their standard engine, and they can rest assured that all the operating ranges are going to be just as Toyota set them from factory. However, there are a lot of people out there, whether or not they just want the extra torque and power, or maybe they want a custom tune on their vehicle to suit the type of driving they do, they can consider any of these performance upgrades to best suit their needs. But this is not where it ends. The ECU can control all aspects of the vehicle, and that includes the transmission. Modifying the vehicle's factory transmission can also make a big difference in the way in which the vehicle handles and gets that maximum performance and efficiency from the engine onto the road. Whether or not you have a highly modified vehicle and you want to offset some of the negative effects that it has on the transmission, or whether you're just towing a heavy load and want the gearbox to behave a little bit differently, changing some of the parameters within the transmission can also be a big advantage. So there are three parameters or three ways in which we can alter the way the transmission works in order to maximize the power from the engine and getting that down to the road. The first thing we can alter within the transmission are the shift points. Now, the vehicle is going to be shifting to and from certain gears at certain times and in certain driving scenarios. It's going to be affected by numerous factors, including but not limited to things like speed, RPM, the engine load, the torque levels, and accelerator input. The vehicle is going to be making hundreds of calculations every second to try and determine what vehicle to be in to best maximize the power from the engine and get that efficiently down to the wheels and onto the road. So then someone like me comes along and I modify the vehicle by adding things like much larger tires, which increase the rolling resistance and the torque on the driveline. I add accessories that affect the aerodynamics of the vehicle and add significant amounts of weight. Now, although the ECU can take some of these calculations into consideration, it won't necessarily take into account some of the physical changes I've made, and this will result in things like hunting of gears and increased transmission temperatures. So a transmission tune that alters the shift points of a vehicle is going to try and close the gap between how a gearbox handled from factory and how it handles now, and whereupon those gears change with all these physical modifications added. Now, the second alteration we can make to our vehicles is by altering the torque tolerances within the automatic transmission. Now, if we're driving an automatic transmission, say at 60 kilometers an hour, and we go to accelerate, the vehicle is likely to downshift and increase the RPM. What this will do is reduce the torque on the gears, the transmission and the driveline, but it will increase the power. And the vehicle's choosing to do that in order to provide the most efficient power to the ground from the engine. Now, if we go and modify this vehicle like we've spoken about earlier, it's going to increase the torque on all the driveline components. The rolling resistance of the tyres, the bad aerodynamics, and just the weight are all going to increase the torque placed on the driveline. However, with the factory set torque tolerances on the gearbox, we're going to be experiencing things like hunting of gears and resulting in higher transmission temperatures. So altering some of the torque tolerances within a gearbox to match some of the accessories fitted to a vehicle, it is going to increase the torque placed on some of those components, but it's going to reduce some of the effects like hunting and overheating transmissions. So the third and very popular way in which we alter the way the transmission behaves is to change the line pressures. So what are the line pressures and how do they affect the drivability of the vehicle, in particular the way in which the transmission behaves? The automatic transmission uses pressurized fluid to control clutch packs and bands in order to engage a certain gear at a certain time. This fluid is pressurized from a pump, normally powered by the engine, to provide the right pressure for a certain driving scenario. So once that pressure has been created, it can be electronically monitored and controlled through the ECU. It needs to be high enough so that there's no unnecessary slippage between the clutch packs and the bands, but also affects the speed at which the gears shift. So typically, a lower pressure will reduce in more slippage and a smoother change between gears, however a slower change, but higher pressure will result in a quicker but harsher shift. But there's a compromise on both ends of this scale. The slower a shift and the more slippage and more smooth the transmission shifts, the more wear and tear that's placed on the internal components. The higher the pressure can result in a faster shift, but also a little bit harsher. So those who modify their vehicles are generally going to experience more slippage within the automatic transmission, and this is because the line pressures are set to a certain rate, but we've increased the load in the form of these modifications. So by altering or increasing those line pressures, we're going to be reducing the wear and tear and the slippage within those internal components, but also making those gears shift quickly. Now, some people may think, well, isn't this just going to make it harsher for the passengers inside the vehicle? However, this is not going to be the case. We're not going to be increasing it dramatically, just enough to try and close the gap from how the gearbox handled from factory to how it handles with all these modifications added. This in turn is not only going to result in decreased wear and tear with a modified vehicle, but also some of the side effects like increased transmission temps should be reduced. So there we have it. They are some of the popular power upgrades available to us as four-wheel drive owners to increase the performance, the efficiency, and perhaps even the reliability in some cases to our vehicles. But what have I chosen to go with my 2014 Toyota Landcruiser 200 series? Well, simply I have chosen to go for an ECU and transmission remap. In January 2021, I had this fitted by Reaper Performance Diesel in Perth, WA. Now, like I recommended earlier on in the video, I did my research about this company. I heard plenty of positive stories. I read all the data they had available, and I spoke with them regarding the tune. This brings me on to another point. This is no race car. I didn't want it for optimal performance and best horsepower out on the street. I wanted a safe and reliable tune that best suited the vehicle in its modified state. So there are three main reasons that I chose an ECU and transmission remap option. The first one being that there's no extra hardware or any deceiving of the ECU. I didn't want to add in an extra object like a chip into the ECU to deceive the signals sent out to the hardware components in order to achieve that better performance. There's no warranty left on this vehicle due to the age anyway, so that wasn't a consideration. I was happy for the ECU to be reflashed or reprogrammed with a new tune to best suit the way that it's set up at the moment. The second reason is the customizability. The fact that this vehicle is being tuned specifically with these modifications present meant that it could go onto the dyno and the tuners could see how the vehicle reacted with different inputs and changes to the parameters and best optimize that for the best possible efficiency and performance over the entire power curve. Now, the third reason I chose this particular package was because of that transmission tune. There are not many chips out there in the market that have access to the parameters within the transmission. Taking it to Reaper Performance meant that I could get all of this work done at once. The transmission could be tuned again to suit the modifications that I've done to my Landcruiser as it's set up today. Now, I did have some prior hardware options installed prior to taking the vehicle in. This includes the 4-inch cold air intake in the form of a snorkel and also the twin 3-inch into single 4-inch exhaust. So again, not only the ECU but the transmission could all be custom mapped and programmed to optimize the efficiency for these modifications. The best thing about the transmission remap as well is that it works well in conjunction with the Stock Lock Extreme Torque lockup kit. So using these two devices side by side, or the two alterations side by side, have made this vehicle very pleasing to drive on the road with ultimate control and the ability to select and manipulate those gears in any way that I need to, whether it be four-wheel drive, low range, slow driving, or towing heavy loads, or just maximum horsepower out on the open road. So how about we have a look at some of the figures that I've managed to get from these tunes. Here is the power and torque curves for my tune. The lower red lines indicate the initial runs and the green lines are the run after the tune had been completed. There is a big difference in both the power and torque, going from 190 horsepower to 245 horsepower at the wheels and 507 newton meters of torque to 642 newton meters. This made an incredible difference to the way in which the vehicle performs and drives. Another observation you can make from this graph is the points at which maximum power and torque are delivered are relatively untouched. The nature or shape of the graph is replicated in both runs, however the performance is significantly increased. So how do these tuners manage to get all of these benefits from simply changing a few electronic parameters? Well, let's have a look at this. Here are two of the primary factors that assisted in this improvement: the air-fuel ratios, or AFRs, and the manifold pressures, or boost pressure. The lower lines show the AFRs have increased slightly, meaning that more fuel and more air is going into the engine. However, what's important to note about this line is the symmetry. The ratio of these elements have not changed. The lines are almost identical in their nature, however, more of each element is going into each power stroke. Further, you can also note an increase in the turbo pressure, going from a stock approximate of 22 psi to about 26 psi. This significantly increases the usable oxygen molecules that enter the combustion chamber and assist in providing better power. And again, we can note that symmetry of lines during the course of the ramp up. Along with the customizability, effectiveness and simplicity of the ECU tune, the transmission remap has really got to be one of the standout features. The ability to change the shift points, the torque tolerances and the line pressures, which we've done all three of this vehicle, has made a huge difference to the way the vehicle handles and the drivability both on and off-road. The fact that it works so well with the stock lock kit has to make it one of my top 5 modifications completed on the Cruiser in terms of benefits overall. The transmission now holds a gear for longer, requires a little bit more of additional load before changing, which reduces the likelihood of hunting and also has reduced the transmission temperatures, but also increasing the line pressures has made the shifts between gears quick, effective, all while reducing wear and tear. And this has had no way affected or negatively affected the passenger comfort in the vehicle. To be honest, anyone jumping in this vehicle would not be able to tell that the transmission has been changed due to the increased torque and loads placed on the vehicle as a whole. In summary, I am very happy with the way the ECU and transmission remap has turned out and the way it's performed flawlessly over the last 14 months of being installed. I've never seen any data outside normal operating temperatures, never had a warning light or an engine light illuminate on the dash, and I'm smiling ear to ear every time I put my foot down. There we have it. They are some of the common and more popular ways to upgrade the performance of your four-wheel drive, or, to be honest, any vehicle for that matter. And I hope this video has been able to convey some of my rationale as to why I've chosen certain products and methods to upgrade the performance of my 200 series Landcruiser and how this all performs in the bigger picture. If not, I hope at least you've managed to pick up some points to consider if you're looking at performance upgrades for your own vehicle. Now, I know some of the points are a little bit controversial in this video, and there's going to be people out there who say that Toyota designed the vehicle for a reason and it should be just left as such. And look, I do agree to some extent. However, when you have a highly modified vehicle or a vehicle that's designed for a specific purpose, like towing heavy loads on a frequent basis, I do think there are significant benefits to having a remap or alterations being completed to maximize the efficiency for that particular application. Now look, I'm not trying to push any products here, and like I mentioned at the start of the video, tuning and these alterations are a very highly individual preference, and it's up to you guys as to whether or not it's going to suit your application. But guys, I hope you enjoyed the video today. I hope you gave you some points to consider, particularly if you're looking at these modifications for yourself. Thanks again for watching all the way to the end, and we'll see you in the next episode. Cheers.